You're listening to Mr. Credit on San Diego 1700 with local credit expert Derek Evans. Now, live in studio, Mr. Credit.
Welcome to Mr. Credit, live and local here in San Diego on 1700 AM. You can catch every Padres game right here on San Diego 1700, so make sure you save this station in your dial. This is the most important hour of radio in town every day, probably in the country. Keep in mind you can always email questions to askmrcredit@yahoo.com. I'm going to get to some of your questions here in a second. Or if you're a Facebooker, you can do a search for Mr. Credit, and you can find me right there. Today we're going to be talking about, as usual, very important stuff involving your credit, how long it takes to repair your credit if your scores are lower, if you have bad marks on your report, employers pulling your credit. I had a question from Miriam yesterday that I answered in as much detail as I could, but today I want to go into more detail about, is this legal? Is it happening? What should you do about it? How should you prepare yourself in case your employer might pull your credit report? We're going to talk about short sale and foreclosure, and we're going to give you the inside track on some very important legal issues that are going on right now that everyone needs to be made aware of. So, one thing you hear me say a lot is that, we live in a what I call channel changer society, or a push button society. And it seems that everyone thinks that no matter what happens, no matter how bad something might be, you can always just go and push a button or go online and give your credit card number and you can fix whatever problem might come up. And the facts are that that's just not true. Now, in some cases you can, but with respect to credit, for example, that's not the case. This is something that you have to build over time, and you have to be conscious of it on a regular basis. If you're not conscious of what your credit score is or what is on your credit report, there's no way you can be prepared for when you're going to need it. And by the time you need it, it's usually too late. I mean, think about credit in a matter of months, not weeks. It doesn't have to be years, but months. It's going to take months to achieve your maximum credit score in most cases. But you have to know where you stand. If you pulled your credit report the last time a year ago, my guess is that it's been at least a year since you last pulled your credit report, and let's say you had a 700 credit score. You're walking around right now thinking that your credit score is 700. Remember, what's on your credit report is only what's happened in the past up until that date. The next day, the day after you pulled that report, something could have popped up. It could be a $50 collection from the city of San Diego for an unpaid parking ticket or unreturned library book. It could cause your score to go down 100 or 150 points. It could have been someone else's account, someone who has a similar name to yours, who had a negative mark show up on something they reported on your credit report instead. Remember, 90+% of credit reports have errors on them. So the first point that I'm making today is that you have to be proactive. Don't expect that you're going to be able to correct this quickly when you need it. By the time you need your credit, it's almost always too late. You've got to be educated about what's on your report, what your scores are right now. I always recommend that you pull your report at least every 3 months. If you pull your credit score and your credit report every 3 months, you can monitor it, make sure you know what's on there, know what your scores are, be conscious of it. How else are you going to know if you're the victim of errors that are so prevalent in credit reporting? There's 3 different bureaus. They all report different information. What are the chances that these 3 big companies are going to get every single account accurately reported on your credit? It's not likely. This is why so many people have errors on their credit reports. So the first lesson is find out what your credit score is. Okay? The site that I recommend you use for this, don't go to these free credit report sites. Those are just guesses. Those are not the actual bureau scores. They're just estimates. We find those to be wrong by as much as 100 points. So if you're going and looking around online to get some free credit report somewhere, that's not what you need to do. Go to CUMIC, CUMIC.org. CUMIC.org. You're going to need an access code. The access code is FICO, F-I-C-O. This allows you to pull a copy of your credit report from all 3 bureaus. It's in the form of a mortgage report, which means it's going to give you all the information, all the status codes, all the scores, all the information on every account that you need to be able to analyze it and see what's going on. If you don't do it, no one else is going to. You've got to do this. If you don't do it today, do it soon. Do it very soon. And if you find that there's stuff on there that you don't know what it is, you don't know how it got there, or maybe you say, hey, that's been paid for years, or it's 10 years old, that's when you need to give me a call. 858-571-0271. You don't have to come on the air. These calls are completely confidential. We can walk you through exactly what you need to do to make sure that your credit report is accurate and your credit score is where it should be. And make sure you get the credit you deserve, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to. So that's lesson 1 today. Now, I got an email that I didn't get to yesterday, and I promised this listener that I would get to it today. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. This is from David. I have a collection where I'm being harassed several times a day. They call me in the morning, the afternoon, and in the evening. They even call my place of employment. Is there a way for me to get them to stop calling and bothering me? I told them I would pay them as soon as I get my tax return. Please advise. Well, David, here's the thing. There is, harassed. If you get called too much, that's technically harassment, and that is a violation of the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. You're not supposed to be harassed. They're not supposed to call you at work. They do it anyway. In fact, collection agencies, like I've said, they'll do anything. They'll call your neighbor and tell them to knock on your door and see if you're there. I mean, it goes very, very far with these guys. And they will call your cell phone. They will call your place of employment. They will call you at home, and they'll call you 20 or 30 times a day, even though they're not supposed to. Here's what you need to do. If you're in a situation where you feel like you're being harassed, then I'm going to have you call William McDonald with McDonald Legal. He will help you figure out, at least, present the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act to these creditors who are harassing you, so that you can stop the harassing phone calls. You just need to give William a call at 858-437-0103, and he can help you figure that out. But the main thing is that if you're going to pay them off, how much are you going to pay them? Have you negotiated with them at all? Is it a third-party collection agency? Those are the questions I have, because if it's a third party, you can probably negotiate the amount you're going to pay them, especially if you're going to pay all in one lump sum. You might be able to get it down to 40 or even maybe 50% of what the balance is. A lot of times they tack on fees when it gets sold to collections. So if they have tacked on a whole bunch of fees, that's just fluff. It's fluff to give them room to negotiate with you. So make sure, before you run out there and pay anybody or sign any agreements to pay anybody, that you've at least attempted to negotiate. And if you don't know what to do as far as the negotiating is concerned, give me a call, 858-571-0271, and I will help you with that. So our theme right now is being proactive. And one of the things that's really important is credit. Something else that's important, I have a guest in the studio today, a good friend of mine, Dan Kehr, with Kehr Law. It's KEHR Law.com. Dan, thanks for coming in today.
How you doing, Derek?
Fantastic. Glad to have you. One of the things that's really important that a lot of people make mistakes on as far as being proactive is concerned, to stick with this theme, is a will versus a trust. Dan, I want you to explain this because you know more than I do about it, but a will doesn't necessarily do what a lot of people thinks that it does.
Yeah, a will just tells the world who you want your assets and your stuff to go to. In order for it to get there, it has to go through what I call the black pit of probate. It takes about 1 to 5 years, depending on the size of your estate, and it ends up costing you about 25 to 35% of your estate.
Now, who does that money go to? I know you say that it costs up to 25-30% of what you have. So if I have $1 million in my estate, let's say my 401k, and I become deceased, and I've got a will that says, I want 50% of my money to go to my wife and 50% of my money to go to my child, or something like that. You're saying that $250,000 to $300,000 of that money is actually going to go into this probate black hole?
Well, it's actually going to, there's a sliding scale. All the creditors of the estate need to be paid off first. So that $1 million already gets dwindled by whatever debts are out there.
Sure.
One of those debts is the attorney's fees. It's on a sliding scale percentage that they get paid on based on the size of the estate. The trustee, or in the case of a will, just the executor, gets a portion of the estate as well for doing all the services, marshaling the assets, doing the final 706 tax return. And the court costs and filing fees are not cheap.
Wow. So, and this is a mandatory thing, right? The probate is actually something that's issued and completed by the state, or is it the county government?
No, actually, probate's basically the court-supervised process of administering a decedent's estate. So if you have over $100,000, you're going to need to go through probate if you don't have a trust.